Hi everybody, welcome back to Capricorn Radio and welcome to Capricorn TV live streaming today. And really excited about today's guest. We're going to be talking to Bruce Fenton with my co-host Heather Elizabeth Osborn. And we have connected with Bruce maybe a year ago now, but it's been a while. We've been so busy, the both of us, trying to connect on the show. But like all my guests, a little quick bio before I bring him on. Bruce Fenton, born 77 in Cheltenham, England. He's the author and investigative journalist, focused on aspects of the unexplained with subject matter ranging from ancient historical mysteries to supernatural occurrences. He's also featured as a guest on a long list of the online radio shows and provided an article for the print magazine New Dawn about his research on a lost city discovered in the jungles of Ecuador, which is where we are live today. So without further ado, let's bring on our super exciting guest. Hi Bruce, you're very welcome to the show.
Hi there, James. Hi, Heather.
Great to have you guys here today. We're going to talk about ancient aliens in Australia, and I know we've spoken to Stephen and Evan Strong before, but you co-authored this book with these guys. I guess we'll focus a little bit on this today, Bruce. I guess before we go with that, what gets you, well, I just alluded to it there, but what gets you to Ecuador? Why an Englishman in Ecuador, as we were just talking before the show?
Well, I mean, it was kind of a strange situation, but if I go back a bit before, I arrived here in January 2012, and just to add a layer of weirdness to that, a year before that, a friend of mine who's a very capable psychic reader and medium was telling me that in 2012 I would be in Ecuador, which I thought was just ludicrous. I mean, I was working as a lettings agent in Cheltenham. That really wasn't on my radar at all, and I just dismissed it. But a year later, I reconnected with an old friend who I didn't know, but she was actually half Ecuadorian, and she invited me to work with her in Spain, teaching English, and I did that. And then we decided to move to Ecuador, where she had a family property. So it was kind of a strange sort of synchronicity, really, because I really had no plans to end up in Ecuador. But yeah, so that's kind of how it happened, and we've remained here since then. So early 2012 till now.
Oh, wow. Tell us what it's like down in Ecuador. I mean, like you say, you were going to do a Lost Cities of Giants book there, which may be articles now. There's a lot of mystery in Ecuador. There's a lot of mystery down there.
There is indeed, yes. I mean, I was probably like yourselves. I was fascinated by stories of the treasures of Padre Crespi in Cuenca, and some of the finds at La Mana, where they have this strange water that's full of monoatomic gold and silver particles, and also I believe, what's the other items they have? Well, the La Mana collection of objects as well, which were found near there, which are particularly bizarre. Some of them seem to be referencing to a lost civilization, Atlantis or maybe some other, but some very strange pieces, and so it's a country full of mystery. You've got Egyptian items, Phoenician, these kind of Atlantean pieces, this, I say, this strange water, then a lost city that we've stumbled on in the jungle. So in many ways, to me, Ecuador is almost the hub of strangeness in Latin America. Wow. Whereas Peru is better known of course for the large structures.
Oh wow. Okay, we'll come back to Ecuador for sure, and if anybody wants to listen along or follow today's author, you can also check out his blog at earthforall.net, as we're talking. Super fascinating blog as well. I'm going to come back to some of the stuff that's on that, Bruce, but here we are to talk today about Ancient Aliens in Australia. Wonderful book. Myself and Heather have got a copy there. It's fascinating. I know a lot of the story from Stephen and Evan Strong. I guess, first of all, tell us how you got involved in this project. That'd be the best thing.
Actually, yeah, a mutual friend had contacted me and said that you guys have written about these Pleiadians and this sort of strange backstory to this ancient aliens event, and that they said, well, we have these friends, Stephen and Evan Strong in Australia, who are kind of talking about the same information but from a different angle, and that it might be beneficial to have a conversation with them and see whether or not there's any overlap there, which might help to sort of, I guess, validate the deeper story behind it, and just to see whether there was any sort of helping each other. So we made a call, and we spoke to them, and they basically, came on video Skype like this, and made a judgment call that we were, basically honest. Obviously a lot of what we've written is particularly strange. So, to a degree, it has to be taken either on faith, at least initially, or dismissed, because we're not saying that, we have a crashed UFO in the garden that we can show someone. So they made a judgment call that we were at least being honest, and that it was worth us exploring, a project together, which would then, I guess, cover the physical and the metaphysical, with us being myself and Daniela, my wife, being the metaphysical half of the book, and then being, of course, the physical.
Sure. Wow. Well, Heather, I'm going to bring you in at this point. You got a question for our super exciting guest today?
Okay, great. I wanted to start at where you began at the beginning of the book with the carry-on glyphs, if that's the correct pronunciation. And if you could give us a little bit of background about that and the duality of the origins for those glyphs that you all have theorized about.
Yes, I mean, the current understanding is, firstly, I'd say that most of the academic community dismisses these glyphs, all of the glyphs, entirely. But for those that are not so dismissive, there appears to be two separate stories recorded into stone at Carry-On. There's 3 walls. One of the walls is fairly straightforward in that it appears to be Proto-Egyptian and tells the story of these Egyptian princes arriving, we think, around 5,000 years ago, on a mission, it seems, to recover some kind of knowledge from Australia and from the people there, so obviously the indigenous peoples, and that this tells this tale of this unfortunate boat wreck, and then the prince, one of the princes, being killed by a snake, the burial, and there's in fact a burial chamber just next to the stones. So the physical evidence supports this story, and there's more Egyptian glyphs nearby, and some objects that have been found which again seem to back this up. So I guess that would be, if any story is validated in the very near future, I suppose it will be that one in terms of the academic side, because the evidence is becoming particularly strong. However, the other 2 walls are a bit more complex, because although there is Proto-Egyptian, there also appears to be Phoenician and unknown glyphs that as yet nobody's been able to interpret, and another story seems to be recorded there. And in this case, it seems to talk about more of an off-world visitation, that a craft that arrives, a similar story in a way. It's almost as if you say history repeating itself at one site, but that another craft voyaged to Australia, this time, an intergalactic craft, and that has, again, there's an event which causes it to disintegrate, some small crafts escape and manage to land, and they are marooned there. So there's this strange overlap, if you like, of the older tale repeating itself with the Egyptians. Of course, academics and indeed most of the public would say, this just can't have happened. It's much more likely that these are fake glyphs, or that somebody has misinterpreted them. But I will add to that there was several years ago, I don't know exactly when this was, but several years ago, another author, Valerie Barrow, wrote a book about this site, and she actually managed to speak to I think it's about 25 people in all that had kind of past life memories of this site. Either spontaneously occurring memories, or in some cases through hypnotherapy, but a bit of a mixture. And that the tale that came together really supports this interpretation of the glyphs. These independent people were all coming up with this story that they had come on a craft, that this craft had been blown up basically by a rival group, and that a small number of survivors had been marooned on Earth, and that they had tried to continue a mission which they had come to do, which was to genetically repair the humanoid creatures on Earth, which had been meddled with previously and were now, I guess we'd call, ape-like creatures, probably something on the lines of maybe Australopithecus or something like that, not particularly advanced, would say. And so they tried to do their best to then repair the damage that had been done to the genetics, with what limited technology was left from the crafts and with the know-how that they had carried with them. So this is the kind of story that was, that seems to be recorded in the glyphs and to be, told in these past life memories. And we, myself and my wife, also have some related past life memories which tie into this. Although we didn't know Valerie Barrow, when we initially were writing the book, Stephen and Evan told us about them after we'd kind of supplied most of the manuscript. So it was quite fascinating, really, to find out that there was 20 or so other people that had connecting memories.
Wow. And that's Star People Revisited. That's the name of the book, isn't it?
That's right, yes. Yes, I think the full title was Start Being Revisited When the First Ancestors Were Created. And so that's available. I highly recommend that because it gives it focuses on the backstory of that visitation and, how the craft ended up destroyed and, to a degree what the beings that were left did. There's blanks which we've tried to fill in, from that book, 'cause it doesn't particularly deal so much with the, I guess, the genetic modifications of these beings and how this process could have continued long enough to make it successful, which we cover in our book. This what we claim to be kind of a directed reincarnation which allowed these beings to continue this program long enough for it to be successful, because in one lifetime you can't really modify like an Australopithecus type being to become an advanced human in a single go. You'd have to be, I mean, we know from genetic modifications of animals today, to perfect something that you want to do would take generations normally.
Wow. I know the guys in Australia, Stephen and Evan, they've had a difficult time against quackademia, academia, whatever you want to call them, and that's fine. I know that the academic world is needed to some extent, but they're also not serving the exploration of truth in any way sometimes as well. I know there's a confrontation there, and I know the guys are up against it as it is, but to bring in the Pleiadian evidence and the origins of humanity, I know that's going to add another layer to it, if you want to call it like that. So it's already a difficult scenario. I know some people don't like that, but I don't get it myself, Bruce, because I think, it wasn't just in Australia. I mean, there's been all sorts of ancient aliens hypotheses at many ancient sites all around the world. And it's like, it's okay for that to be there, but not to be in Australia. I don't get it myself. I don't get why, you need to have a safe point in history that you can say aliens came, but you can't over to something that's not really known about. I just don't get it.
No, I mean, I think, I suppose partly, of course, they have this strong academic hatred that originates with the idea that, that they're tackling the ancient, the out of Africa issue, that they're saying, so I mean, initially you're going to get a huge amount of hostility for that alone because it's such a sacred cow, the idea that we all came out of Africa. So I mean, obviously Stephen and Evan already have that kind of level of, I guess, disdain from the academic community that originates. So anything else they put onto that, yes, is just going to it's like fuel into the fire, really. But I think probably that in many ways is the real source of a lot of that animosity, is the fact that they're really attacking a sacred cow in science, and that had they not been saying that and they just tackled the alien stuff, if you like, perhaps it would have been ignored more and said, well, okay, it's another lot to my ancient aliens over. But I think because it involves this other story, this the changing this view of known human history, that they really have been attacked, and they were very brave to bring us in. I mean, at one point they were advised by a publisher that that it'd be best not to have us involved, and I said, honestly, if you don't want us, just if you don't want us to be involved, I totally understand, because I don't want to ruin your chances of having your information shared. You've been very understanding with us, but at the same time I don't want to actually make it harder for you, but they were very straight and said, we've said we'll work on it. And so they went ahead and did it, and I have a lot of respect for them for that, because I think most people wouldn't have, especially with, well, as I said, already having a lot of trouble, that then to bring that in. But the way they explained it to us was that the elders kept saying to them, look, when are you going to talk about the Pleiadians? When are you going to say that, we're telling you this is our history, that they came here and that they are our forefathers? And I suppose it just got to a point really for them that they felt, well, we have to talk about it sometime, why not now, kind of thing, why not? We've got these people that are, willing to come in with us and give us a bit of their view on the Pleiadians, and, and it's, I suppose, going to make the elders feel that, you're tackling that side of it, which is what they wanted.
Wow.
Because you provide some really compelling stories from the original people, don't you, from the elders? For example, Auntie Beeve, and then the 1896 publication that you discovered of the original elder stories.
Stephen sort of found it, but yes, they've got this information now, which came from some of the information came from an archaeologist in Australia. I can't remember the name, I'll be honest, but that there was initial research done on a site which they call now the Australia Stonehenge, which in the notes of the archaeologist, and this guy was the head of the Archaeological Society, in Australia, so very respected, a lot of credentials, and he interpreted glyphs on these stones, which basically read like, sci-fi, because he's talking about, out of the darkness they came, bringing the light of truth, and and coming to earth, and basically kind of retelling this same story that appears on the glyphs, saying that these beings brought this wisdom, and that they basically shaped mankind, and provided all this ancient knowledge. But it's this is an academic who, when he first looked at these glyphs, was not expecting to interpret them in this way. Was very surprised that even there were glyphs on a huge megalithic site in Australia, a place where it was pretty much looked at as there should be nothing, because the people there were supposed to be monkey-like humanoids, rather than advanced human beings like everyone else. And as we know, the English treated them as such, that they were little more than animals, and did their best to eradicate them. So the fact that an archaeologist nearly 100 years ago was willing to even talk about the idea that there was a site there with writing on it, for a start, was pretty amazing. But then the interpretation really is pretty mind-blowing, because it again just tells this same story of this coming out of the darkness and arriving on Earth, and bringing this light of wisdom with them. So it's pretty mind-bending, and I think as people start to look into some of the other sites that Stephen and Evan have been working at, including this Stonehenge site, but also areas with underground tunnels which show megalithic blocks in the tunnel structure that are similar to Peru and to elsewhere, and a number of sites with enormous megalithic blocks involved in what looked like ruined constructions. It really paints a picture of there having been a very widespread and fairly advanced civilization in Australia a very, very long time ago. I mean, way before recorded history.
Wow. What can we know, either from the elders or the glyphs or the messages or the research about the Pleiadian beings? Physical description, any description, intention? Did they get the job done? Did they get us fixed? Or, tell us a little bit more the background of the story of the Pleiadians.
Sure. I would sort of concur really with most of what Valerie has said, which is that essentially this craft arrives with the intention of modifying these humanoid beings, but that if you take on board that the perfect mission would have been, of course, that this craft, I suppose, arrives, sends down all the scientific equipment that it has on board, the experts that are on board, and that they modify these beings in a perfect manner over a period of time, and that then everything would have been fixed, I guess, and you could say they would have left and everything been happy, it's all done. But with the this other side story, which basically is that another group of reptilian type beings ambushes this craft and destroys it in orbit, that you're kind of left with a very imperfect situation with a small number of beings. And I would say when you say Pleiadians, I mean, I'll just clarify here, because from my perspective, this is a group of different types of beings that have come together on a craft to do something, and they originate from the direction of the Pleiades star cluster. I don't think that any of these beings probably have a homeworld in the Pleiades. The Pleiades is a pretty young star birthing cloud.
Very hot.
Yeah, it's very unlikely that there's any worlds there that have been there long enough for advanced life to actually, to exist on them. If they're there, then it's artificially, it's either artificial bases or they're terraformed worlds. Because we have to be sort of realistic and say that these stars are not really generally ready to be giving up life. My view of it is that they came from that direction, and that there are worlds in that direction, but they're not necessarily in the Pleiades star cluster. I mean, if you arrive and you're trying to explain to a non-advanced civilization where you come from, it's pretty easy just to point and say, well, it's over there. You see those bright stars over there? We're from around there. But that doesn't mean they necessarily live in the Pleiades. But these beings were of different types. I mean, as Valerie has described, some would look a bit like greys. Others that we would personally we feel more aligned to are tall human-looking beings with a kind of it's a bluish kind of skin. If you imagine the surface of a pearl, it's a rather greyish, bluish, whitish colour. Very tall, typically between sort of 7 to 9 feet in height. Fairly slim build. Odd-looking person by any standard today. But that is the group that myself, my wife, and some of the other people I know would say that we are reborn from, if you like. And so we're dealing with reincarnation here. I mean, I don't look like an 8 foot tall blue being. So we are talking about reincarnational history. There were other beings involved. I mean, certainly from her description, some were robotic type beings and silicon based life, and some very strange beings that were involved in this. But so when we say Pleiadians, it has a kind of a myth of in the New Age and in ufology, generally associated with what people call tall whites, but which basically are just tall white people from the general description, which I think may be a bit of a misnomer, where someone perhaps saw one of these beings, and if you said the closest kind of color, you might say, well, it looked like a tall white person, but they're not actually white. Not the Pleiadians that I would align to. I'd say that they're a slightly bluish color, so they're definitely not Aryans, which I think there's a lot of confusion there, that this idea that once upon a time some advanced Aryans went around the world, making everything happen, and it's obviously there's an alignment there to certain, I guess, white supremacist type thinking, which is problematic. You can go into a whole side debate there, really, because I always sort of find that a bit of a dodgy subject, because of course, if you start saying that, well, there was these white beings and they did everything, particularly to non-white cultures that have suffered a lot under colonialism, it doesn't sound very good. But, from my perspective, anyway, I'm
going to have to let down some of my Facebook people then, because they keep calling me a Pleiadian. I'm tall, 6'3", and I got big blue eyes, and they just think I'm a Pleiadian.
You may well be, but I mean, as I say, it's none of us look quite like them. I'd say that they are, they're alien looking. I mean, they don't look the same as. I mean, do you remember a case? I think it was. I may have this wrong. Was it Colin Wilson that a few years back near Stonehenge, that there was two beings seen by a police officer, and that these two beings had sort of white, close-fitting clothes, a slightly bluish skin, and he said they were near to a crop circle, and as he sort of watched them, they moved at incredible speed, and then just vanished. I mean, that would be a fairly accurate description of Pleiadians. Very tall, slightly bluish skin, typically wearing white fitted clothes. They can move at incredible speeds. They can perform very, very amazing feats of agility, and also have incredible strength, incredible psychic gifts. He was left with all sorts of headaches and problems from even being near them. So, I mean, that would be, I would say, the best modern sighting of these types of beings that I know of. And then again, from an expert witness, from a police officer who really had everything to lose by even saying that he'd seen these beings. So it's not that they're no longer around either. So when we talk about ancient aliens, some of these beings, they still do visit. And you'll see the same beings depicted by shamans in South America from ayahuasca experiences. There's a number of remarkable pictures that show what I would say is classic Pleiadians. The skin color, absolutely, perfectly how it's described, with this kind of pearl-like, slightly bluish skin. I mean, so I'll pull up some pictures and send them to you, but there's some really amazing pictures of what I would say are Pleiadians, because we're talking about hyperdimensional beings that can appear in the physical or also appear in sort of 5 dimensions. So, a shaman can be sitting in trance and interact with one, just as one could land theoretically and kind of a spaceship, because of, it's a very advanced race, very advanced civilization with an understanding of, higher dimensional physics. Otherwise, you couldn't come here, for a start.
Heather, do you want to jump in there?
Yeah, you've had your own really powerful shamanic experiences, haven't you, Bruce? Can you share with us a little bit about your first experience when you realized you had a past life connection to the Pleiades?
Yes, I mean, there's 2 particular experiences, I suppose, which now I fully understand relate to this. The first one, yes, was I first became sort of, I guess, involved with shamanic practices back in about 2001. And one of my sort of experiments with that was I actually ate Hawaiian baby woodrose seeds, which are, they contain LSA. They're a kind of a traditional, method of entering an altered state of consciousness. And during that experience, I had, 3 different experiences. 2 of them are not really relevant here, but one of them, I found myself suddenly not myself, as this very tall, different shaped person, piloting a craft, being pursued. I could see that the earth was below me. I was heading down towards it. There was an awareness that I was part of a larger group, and that something had gone terribly wrong, and that most of these beings were dead, and that I was, basically being pursued towards the surface of the planet. I knew that there'd been some kind of betrayal. and I was aware I was wearing this blue uniform, this kind of blue outfit. Not sure if there was anyone else on the craft. It didn't really come up, but certainly that was my first kind of, if you like, a link to like an alien type experience, where it was clear I wasn't, a normal human, and that, piloting a craft which was very unlike, I guess, human crafts. Normally we can't fly very far into space, as you know. Unless you chug along to the moon in one of those old rockets. But yeah, it wasn't like that. It was an advanced craft, able to go at high speeds, etc. And that was my first experience in that. And then after that, I kind of didn't know what to do with that. This is obviously a long time ago, and I didn't have any reference point to attach that to. I didn't really know anything about Pleiadians particularly, and I had a very basic knowledge of ufology, just as someone interested in the unexplained. But I really couldn't relate it to any other stories I'd heard or anything. So I just left that. It just got left as one of those strange experiences you have. And then, well, I suppose a couple of years later, I had another experience, which at the time I didn't know related to this at all either, which was I was talking in a chat room to a couple of other psychics, and this was for the Hafani Co-ed Spiritualist Centre, which is in the Brecon Beacons, which I know that I think, James, you've mentioned being to that area. You made it, but it's a small, spiritualist centre, and they run all sorts of courses. But I was in their chat room having a conversation with someone about, I think, just about some kind of holistic therapies, or it was, nothing particularly exciting. And then in the middle of this conversation, like that, bang! I'm no longer in the room. I'm flying through the air. I don't know if I have physical body. It feels like I have my body. I'm flying through the air above a jungle scene. There's an emerald green canopy below me, and I'm heading towards what I can see is a kind of a white stepped pyramid ahead of me. And this is a shining white pyramid. So on some level, I'm kind of aware. This is weird because today, Mayan, Aztec pyramids are, for anyone who's seen them, they're pretty grey, really. They've been attacked by the elements for a very long time. And to see this shining white structure, I knew this had been very recently built. It may not even been finished being built. It was so sort of shiny new. And as I came in closer, I started to have some awareness. There's information you're just picking up from the background that this is the hub of some civilization that I can't see, and that this is a kind of a beacon to them, this shining white structure, the sun literally glaring off of it. Getting closer and closer, I can see there's a man standing on top of this pyramid, tall, in sort of not much clothes, very shamanic-y looking. I guess you think of a North American medicine man in a kind of traditional outfit, a bit like that. Certainly, not a modern person by any stretch, someone indigenous, and holding this staff. He's doing some kind of ritual on top of the roof. I don't remember any sound from this experience. All the information I got was just intuitional. Get close enough, I realize that somehow I know that there's a secret tunnel goes down into this structure, and I know a few other things, but okay, very weird experience. Stops, bang, back in my room. I think, well, what the heck is that? I've had a number of psychic and supernatural experiences from 15 onwards. So, in that context, I say it probably didn't freak me out as much as it would some people, but it still was remarkable. And then I continued talking to the woman. I said, something really strange just happened. She said, yes, were you flying through the air towards a pyramid? And yes. She goes, I was there with you. She goes, I saw it as well. She says, and I was given that the year was, it was 675 AD. And she said, and also that the experience was meant to be for you, not for me, which, couldn't make any sense really anyway, because I wasn't involved with Mayans or Aztecs. So it's like, why is it for me? You were there as well. I have no connection to this. And that led to my research into the Mayans and into 2012. I spent 7 years running a website, 2012rising.com. Changed my course of my life entirely, really, because I spent a lot of time focused on trying to understand why that had happened, what was important about that area, where that might have been, etc., etc. And so really spent a long time involved with even going to sites like Palenque, which I identify now as being that site that was part of the Palenque complex. In fact, I believe it's the Templo Olvidad, which is the Lost Temple, which is in the forests nearby to the main site. People can go to it with guides. And that site actually, I feel was where it was happening. Now, much later, fast forward again, the experiences my wife Daniela has in Ecuador, which kind of really get this all going again, which is in 2012. She begins having shamanic type experiences, journeys, where they're taking her to Palenque, and eventually becomes explained to her that both of us have had this life there. where we are these hybrids living there. And so that this man who was on top of the temple is my past self, who is doing something to call me back there because he wants to share this information with me. But the thing fails. And my suspicion is because this other woman is pulled into the experience, that somehow it stops it from functioning, that she shouldn't really have been there. And that's why this being says this experience was for him, not for you. And that the whole thing stops and bang, we're back in our own rooms. And then they try again, but this time with my wife, who I consider to be my twin flame and my life partner, and they pull her in instead, and she gets the full experience of what they wanted to do, which is showing her these sites under the city, remarkable things, laboratories, all sorts of strange things, which I believe are still under Palenque. I should stop there, let you just because it's a lot.
Wow.
That's great. That's great. Including a Hall of Records, correct? That they said that existed there still?
Yeah, so Hall of Records, which contains different types of records. There were some of the things were green tablets, which immediately reminded me of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth, because having seen the information about just the physical descriptions of these, she saw crystalline type tablets with runic type writing on large numbers of these. A collection of crystal skulls of various colors, and then other recordings, just engravings on walls and stuff in strange glyphs and things. So I said that they seem to have a collection of different types of records that they've gathered together to protect under Palenque. The crystal skulls particularly important. They play a key role in a lot of what she's shown, because there's an ongoing attempt by another group of these tall greys who are continually trying to get hold of these skulls. And it's explained to her that if you have all of these, original skulls, you can do really incredible things. You can modify the weather, you can change, you can cause earthquakes, you can do all sorts of strange things. So they're particularly worried about these falling into any wrong hands. And she's pretty much continually given, tasks by the then Lord of Palenque, who's Lord Hanab Pakal, to basically hide these and to keep moving them and hiding them. And then he manufactures copies of them, which they leave to be kind of taken away by these other groups. Very bizarre. And I should add to this, it's not channeling or something where we're sitting in the room and we both ooh, let's see what we can get, or there's nothing like this at all. I mean, particularly for Daniela, it was a nighttime thing. She'd lie down and as if you're gonna go to bed like a normal night, she'd suddenly feel she needs to lie down, and then would just be like bang, she'd go through a wall. It'd feel like an energetic barrier, particularly painful, literally the feeling of being pulled into millions of pieces to pass through this barrier, horrendously painful. I've seen her pretty much almost screaming in pain a couple of times with that. And then on the other side of these experiences happen.
And do you believe that these tall greys that were malicious, that were concocting a plan at that time in Palenque, that they were involved later in other aspects of destruction, or earlier, in fact, in terms of Atlantis or other, malicious plots that were involved in the history of our world?
Yeah, I think so. And I think I would probably associate them with the Gnostic archons. I think that they're one and the same, that these tales of these, archonic beings that have sort of, I guess, plagued us throughout history. But they also seem to be associated with these reptilian. There may be various types of reptilians and various types of greys. That's certainly, for anyone who looks at ufology and reports of alien visitations, there does seem to be multiple types of similar looking beings. So, and I will just say that I can't say that all grey looking, the grey type beings and all reptilians are evil. I don't know that, but there's certainly at least two groups of these beings, which are not in the best interest of humanity. These particular tall greys who are working with these small greys, but the small greys very much seem to be their lackeys. That I can't even say for sure if these small greys are bad or whether they just have been enslaved and are just being made to do things. I mean, I know a lot of people say in their reports of abductions that when they're on craft, that the tall greys are stood behind, making the small greys do the experiments and to do all these other things. So I'd say that the tall greys are really the malicious element in the story, in that story of abductions and these past events, as are at least one group of reptilian type beings. I mean, there's a whole sort of additional bit of exopolitics going on in this scenario as well, because the first experience that my wife had, she is taken down into an area in Palenque, and I should just add here that she's not in her normal body. She's in a much taller, much stronger body, and he becomes aware that this is not her normal self, enters a room where there's a group of other very tall, people dressed in Mayan traditional clothes, but that are way too tall for Mayan people. The typical Mayan of the time was around about 5 foot, and these people are more like 7.5 foot, so they stand out straight away as being, odd, and they're having this debate. There's one group who is saying that they need to work with these tall greys, that they need their technology, their know-how, particularly of genetic engineering, and there's another group saying that they shouldn't work with them because they're completely untrustworthy, and that they would almost certainly double cross them at some point. But in the end, because the leader is kind of on the side of, well, we can form a treaty that benefits us for the moment, that they sort of go ahead with it. And the idea is that there's an upcoming war that they need to enhance their warriors to fight. It's not made completely clear who this war is with. I mean, I know that historically Palenque fought a couple of wars with a nearby city-state, which is basically the city of the snakes, which is a kind of funny kind of tie-in. So one has to wonder, are these reptilians basically running one city, and these Pleiadian hybrids are running another city, and that they sporadically are fighting a war with each other. That's certainly the gist that we've come away from it with. Not 100% sure on that, but that certainly seems to be. I don't know why else they would need this technology to fight a normal Mayan state. I mean, they should be able to easily defeat them with the knowledge they have and with the beings that are involved, because the Pleiadian hybrids are much stronger. There's no way a normal Mayan soldier could kill one. No way. I mean, at some points they're moving at almost lightning speeds where it's almost impossible to see them. Some of the fights between some of these beings, for a normal person to watch would see just something just move around the room at high speed. They wouldn't really know these beings were there. So they're not really people that you could go into fight with swords and expect to beat them. So there's something else going on here. And in the end, this treaty is made. There is this agreement to work in the labs to enhance the strength of some of the soldiers. I guess the first super soldiers, I guess you might say. I know that even today people talk about super soldier programs going on in the secret, with our clandestine governments, which are, probably very similar. And that these beings kind of are there under the city, these tall greys, and also these hybrids. Mostly they are under the city. On the general rule, some of them, the higher caste people, the king and others are up on the surface, obviously have to do things, but most of the stranger stuff is going on below ground. I think that a lot of these labs can still be accessed. To be honest with you, if I can go to Mexico again with my wife, we would be looking to find an entrance into these areas and to prove this, because of course, I mean, I believe to some degree in the scientific method, and in proof, that, I think that, the ultimate of this would be to enter those labs and to show what's in there, and to find possibly this hall of records, at least to see the glyphs on the walls if other things have been moved, and to validate this, because I strongly feel that we can do that. That this doesn't have to remain as kind of just believe me.
Could you comment on the Crespi collection, Father Crespi's collection in Ecuador? What you think about it?
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean some of the pieces in Ecuador, which kind of tie into certainly the idea of a lost civilization. I mean, it may be that they tie into the alien visitation. In the Crespi collection, you have some really incredible pieces, a wide range. I mean, there's for people who don't know, Father Crespi basically said that he was working with the Shuar, which is an indigenous tribe in the Oriente, in the jungles here, and that they really revered him as a saint, because he did so much for them. He was always trying to help. He had a fair amount of personal wealth. He would arrange for medical help for people. He would do all sorts of really nice charitable acts. And so they became to so sort of trust him and to so revere him that they would thank him by bringing him presents out of the jungle. Except these presents would be, strange pieces of, either technology, sometimes pipes and strange cogs and gears, and other times they would be metal plates, gold plates, silver plates covered in ancient symbols. Other pieces, helmets, crowns, armor, a really wide range of artifacts. In the end, he collected 70,000 artifacts. He had the single largest museum collection in Ecuador, larger than the official Quito Museum and everybody else put together. So absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you've got 70,000 pieces coming out of the jungle from a tribe who were considered to be basically Stone Age tribes. And there's people to say that these guys were faking it, but you have to really then say, well, how is a tribe that's considered to be Stone Age out in the jungle, running some giant furnace, melting steel and gold and silver and banging out all of, 70,000 artifacts, of armor and plates covered in Sumerian and Egyptian and Babylonian. There's a point where you have to say, look, that's not the answer. That is not a valid response to the artifacts. One poignant comment made by someone was that, why on earth would a fraudster fake an object in pure gold and then sell it to someone at less than the value of the gold itself? And that was commonly happening with Crespi. So, I mean, it's a nonsense to say that these people were trying to just hoax him. He admits himself that he bought pieces that were fake. He said, I want to keep these people bringing me real things, and I also want to, not to embarrass them by saying in front of people, that's a load of rubbish, throw it in the bin. So he said I would give them a small amount of money and just buy the fake pieces as well, and just put them away somewhere. Clever. So he admitted himself that.
But that's clever. That's a clever approach.
It is. He gets attacked for that, but it kept the real artifacts flowing out of the jungle. And what is even stranger, if you like, again, we're going to the underground here, because he said that the Shuar told him that most of the artifacts were coming from an extensive tunnel network underneath the jungle. They said there were also temples and pyramids on the surface, ruined, but that most of the artifacts were hidden inside a vast tunnel network, and that the walls of these tunnels were absolutely mirror-like, in terms of the smoothness and the reflectivity. It sounds like they had been melted, or in some way, vitrified, or some chemical had been put on. This wasn't just, a normal, I guess, rough-hewn cave system, or something of that like. It sounded itself as though the site was particularly bizarre. The temples and pyramids were described by the local Shuar as glowing blue at night, as though that inside that they had been coated in some kind of material that literally lit the inside. And that's a reference I've heard come up elsewhere in Egypt and other places, that sites which can glow at night, this some kind of lost technology, a paint that's maybe bioluminescent. I mean, I'm not sure exactly how that works, but very strange descriptions of these sites where these people are getting these artifacts from.
It almost kind of beckons back to either an ancient alien question or halls of records of, maybe they're dotted all around the planet. From a lot of people think if there was a global cataclysm or several cataclysms, that we had halls of records dashed all around the planet as little safe havens for the knowledge.
Absolutely. I mean, you probably both know about Casey's predictions of, the three halls of records, with the one being obviously in Egypt, most likely somewhere deep under the Sphinx. And, we all know that, okay, there's, evidence that exists, that there's chambers certainly under that area. Well, I mean, there's more chambers and tunnels at the Giza Plateau than there is buildings, I would say, because at this point, from what I understand, I mean, I've been into some areas. I have friends that have been into much deeper and much more exciting areas with, a vast lake, a huge cavern under the Giza site, which the official scientists have been down into, because there was rubber boats and things down there. So they're going down, regularly and taking artifacts out. I went into one area which I think it's to the west of the pyramids in the desert there, but on the Giza Plateau. There's a giant fence goes right around the site for people that haven't been there and, won't know that. But of course, locals...
They call it the Hawass Wall, the wall of Hawass. Wall.
Within there was all his treasures he was busy stealing, and unfortunately, I think he got a lot. But, I was taken to one site through a friend, and, his contacts. And this was really strange site because, it's out away from the pyramids. You can see the pyramids from there, but you wouldn't be able to see this site because the structures are quite small. But they really reminded you straight away of some kind of bunkers. They are concrete, look like concrete bunker type structures, but there's a one entrance goes in, you go down a few steps, and then it kind of splits. So it's about 3 of these bunkers, and then you kind of take a turn, and then there's one of these perfect square shafts, which people will see in front of the pyramids, the shaft, very similar. You climb down, there's only handholds in the walls, just, it's very old, you can see they're very worn, scaled down carefully. Then there was a cave network, and then within there, I'd say the cave network was an enhanced natural cave network. And then from in there was bones, there was remains of sarcophagus, people who'd chosen to be buried there, high profile people, because these were remnants of beautiful sarcophagus. And then the tunnels would go further down to other shafts, which drop down so deep that you can't go down without, climbing equipment. But the minute you go in, particularly if you're intuitive, there's this sense of people running into this place, that this is somewhere they ran to for safety, and they went down, and that they didn't come back up. That it's so deep, some of these shafts, that you can't imagine how they ever came back up. That these people went down, they moved down there to get away from something, and my suspicion would be that if we ever went down there, we'll find either the obvious remnants of their civilization, or maybe them. I don't discount that. I mean, my wife's had experiences, particularly in astral travel dreams, where she's been down into some of those areas, and the beings there have said, look, if you ever have real trouble, you guys, you can come down and join us down here. And some really strange experiences. And I know that my friend Richard Gabriel, who I don't know if you've ever had one, but he does a lot of work out in Egypt. He's described some astral experiences, from experiments he's done out there, of entering chambers on the astral there and seeing some remarkable things, and on the top of the pyramid and elsewhere. So, I mean, you have this, as you say, this underground kind of labyrinth there, and around the world, many others. I mean, so I could go on and on. I know I end up talking over you, but I'll just quickly say that going back to Mexico, because Casey, I'll go back to Mexico. One of the sites he talked about was the Yucatan. He says that, we will find another one of these sites somewhere under the complex out in the Yucatan, and there'll be, another Hall of Records revealed there. And when I was in Mexico back in 2010, I think it was, I went to a site. I'm not going to say where it is, just because I don't like to encourage someone else to go and then maybe particularly nefarious people to go there and just take everything out of it all. But we were visiting a site which is mostly rebuilt. It wasn't a particularly impressive complex, to be honest, in a way, because it's heavily rebuilt, and it was almost a bit cartoonish, I felt, because you could see that they had put it back together for the benefit of tourists largely. And myself and my friend were kind of wandering off to one side, and we noticed a strange hole which was probably not much bigger than a well for a bucket, probably that kind of, a bit smaller probably, but enough you put a bucket down. And we thought, oh, it must be some kind of dry water system, because you could look down and see a tunnel inside. And then there was one of the sort of park, sort of, I guess the groundsman, I don't know what you'd call them, but one of the official, one of the guys from the Pyramid Park, an old Mayan chap, and we sort of asked him. He said, what is this? Is this a well or something? And he said, oh, no. It's down there. He says there's sort of a tunnel system. And he explained to us. He said, because many years ago, he says, a group of archaeologists from the US came here. He said, and I was charged with going with them to this site at the entrance to the tunnel system. He said, where they did a dig, and he said initially they found a very strange burial with a chest, and on either side were two skeletons sitting with their heads in their laps, the skulls in their laps, buried around this chest. And he said, so obviously that was the first really strange element. He said, but then the entrance itself, he said, we sort of went into, and we entered this tunnel system, and it went on and on, he said, for kilometers. And he said, and there was signs of wheel tracks, and the Mayans didn't have wheels. He said there was wheel tracks inside. And he said, and then we noticed there were kind of holes going down. I said, well, look, what do you mean? Are you talking about a multi-layered catacombs? And he said, yes, absolutely. He said, and it's kilometers of tunnels under there. And he said, and as we went further in, strange noises started to happen. He said, and these became more and more bizarre, to the point where the archaeologists got so scared they fled the tunnel network. He said, and they've never returned to this site. And he said, and in our view, this is a bad place. He says, we feel that there's a lot of negative paranormal activity here at night, very off-putting. So that we have objects thrown at us, stones are thrown at us. We see duendes, which is, loosely speaking, is child spirits, they're kind of trapped spirits here, and very whilst there's the funny is, you've got these Europeans there that are doing these rituals of positive, and we're going to open up the site, and for the Mayans they're like, no, we don't really like to go on the site, it's got all this weird energy here, there's something really off-putting, and there's these tunnels, and so it's really sort of funny that when you sort of get the Mayan view of these sites, some of them, that they're a bit more cautious, and that there was certainly the suggestion there that there's a huge catacomb system there, and that would be and this is in the Yucatan. There's a very ancient Mayan site in the Yucatan with kilometers of tunnels under it. So I have a strong suspicion that this is the site that Casey's talking about. And again, if I ever have the chance with a group of people that are willing to go and do a bit of caving and climbing, I would be very happy to go down there and see what's down there. I mean, despite the off-putting noises, I think that's pretty much a show to keep away people that really don't know what they're doing. So I think these sites are very valid. I think there's a number of these, probably more than 3. I think there are catches of knowledge all over the planet.
Bruce, I want you to do me a favour and take a moment to give out the people your wonderful websites, where they can catch you, the book for the website, and your personal blog as well. Just give them all out there and people will follow along. And then I'm going to throw the last question to Heather.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. So my main site, Earth for All, and that's the number 4, earthforall.net. And yeah, my secondary site would be brucefenton.info, and either of those are, they can follow on things I'm doing. brucefenton.info, I'm going to try and put more of the articles about the site in Ecuador on that shortly. But yeah, they'll find some of that already on Earth for All. And the book of the Ancient Aliens is on there. Ancient Aliens in Australia is on the sites.
Ancient Aliens in Australia. And what I love about the websites is there's wonderful stuff there. Mysteries are abound. Esoteric spirituality, consciousness studies, mysteries. You must be really attached to this area of research, Bruce. I mean, you don't put this together or get this enthralled by something unless you're passionate about it. So I can see that in the website. So I do want to draw attention to get people over there and catch it there. Heather, have you got one last question before we wrap things up?
Yeah, I do. I was just curious, in terms of the visionary experiences that you and Daniela have had, is there some kind of prediction that you can share with us in terms of a hope for a new humanity, for things to shift, that the Pleiadian agenda in terms of reconstructing our world might have a positive outcome in the future sometime?
Yes, I mean, I strongly feel that, that these beings and others being trying to sort of guide our thinking more towards a universal consciousness that, particularly if we look at the messages that come through from, say, shamans and people that are contacting these beings regularly, that usually the information is beneficial, even, to do with, healing work, or to do with, ways that they could better structure their societies. On the whole, I'd say that the contact information is aimed at, progressing humanity. And of course, sometimes there's things come through a bit more scary and things that, warnings and stuff. But I mean, overall, it does certainly seem it's nudging us in the right direction to become what I would say we probably once were, a planet that was part of a larger global community, and that is the intention of these various beings. I'm not going to say that there's never any, nefariousness or trickstering and all sorts of strange things happen, but I also feel that we've entered a time now, and I do relate a bit to 2012, that that this new paradigm, that the old understandings seem to be flooding back in the form of look at some of these ancient sites that have turned out recently, like Gunung Padang and obviously in Turkey, a number of sites there which are showing that our civilization goes back way back from before, not 6,000 years ago, more than 12,000, keep going back. I'd say, it just goes back and back and back. So, I mean, I think that this is all coming out at this time because it's the time when the ancients return, and this energy of the ancients is returning. So my view of it is very positive that, we are in that time now when it goes back to the beginning, which was a better beginning.
Wow. Well, we're going to wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up with that, guys. brucefenton.info for today's author, and earthforall.net if you want to check out Bruce's blog. I just love the information. I love the mysteries, and I love the research, Bruce. So finally we got there. Thank you for today's show. Heather, thank you too.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you both.
Thank you very much.
It's wonderful.
Really appreciate it. Hope to talk to you again.
Okay. For sure.
Thanks, Bruce.